Sanibonani, Dumelang, Molweni, Mzansi Africa. Welcome to the biggest youth show in the land, Expressions, right here on SABC One Mzansi for sure. Uyakuqonda ukhumbule kaloku umbukeli into yokubana eli liqonga lakho njengomntu omtsha into yokubana uzityande igila. As we are celebrating Heritage Month, on today's show, we are focusing on the rise of sangomas. Kwezi ntsuku kaloku umbukeli ungathi we are left, right and center, thokoza gogo. We are seeing a lot of young people, including our local celebrities, undergoing intwaso. Is it possible that young people bayathwasa because they think it's a trend, okanye young people are finally receiving their spiritual awakening and it's a genuine calling? What do you have to say about today's discussion?
Mzansi Africa, and of course I am Uliema Vomisa. Now, so that's most certainly true because the times are definitely evolving and people are becoming more accepting of people who have different callings and cultures and beliefs. Now, it is with no doubt that about 2 decades ago, Ubungoma had a negative connotation and stigma attached to it. However, young people now seem to be taking a different approach from our elders, and it is obvious that they are embracing Ubungoma in other cultural aspects. Now, expressions namhlanje is ukuba Ukuthwasa, is Ubungoma really a trend, or is it an actual calling that is valid? Well, we also asked Amadabacha on the street, so what do they have to say about this very important question, and this is their response to it.
Others, they do have a calling, yes, and then Babangwe, I think the confusion eating. We as Kwabela sometimes say, we say everyone unalembatimu, and then which is how everyone unalembatimu. Someone on motor unalembatimu. Honestly, mo kelelong ya hae sana le ntshoreng tshwantse ke tsamaye ke lo thwasa, and then badimo ba tla ka ditsela tse fapafapaneng, dineo tsa rona ga di tshwane.
Ukuthwasa njengamanje bayakuthatha as fashion, but ukuthwasa kusi fashion. Ukuthwasa kusuka kube isiphiwo esakho uzalwa naso ora kanye emndenini wakini. Akusiyinto ukuthi ngayihalela ngithi ngiyathwasa because it's a fashion, no.
Our parents just didn't follow tradition, and our parents were lost for a very long time, so we are just going back to our roots because it's necessary.
Angasho ukuthi abantu esiphile nabo abazali bethu bebayibalekela lento le because they had that stigma yokuthi ukuthwasa batreata kanje nakanje nakanje nakanje. Hence i-generation yamanje uzosibona sithwasa sibaningi, and but they will say fashion vele ngoba sibaningi because abazali bethu abokhokho bethu nabomkhulu bethu bayibalekile, so these things says atheka thina.
Bakhona abathwasa ngokugula. Umuntu uyagula HIV, zokwenzela example, uneshukela bangakhona understand. Bathini bathi lo muntu unedlozi kanti akanadlozi ukugula.
Not everyone utlamela tsama ayilo thwasa, and then batho ba bangwe ba tsama ba ilo thwasa because of confusion, the trauma, problems tse re tsamang re kopana le tsona.
Nokuhlanganisa imindeni. There's a lot okulungisayo in the process yokuthwasa. It's not necessarily to go heal people, but we are healing our families in the process, which is very necessary because imindeni eminingi ihlakazekile just because we are not rooted in our traditions right now.
Well, there you have it, Mbugile Expressions. Interesting views are there from other people on the street. Now, to, of course, perhaps help me unpack this discussion a little bit further. I have the multi-talented South African actress, popularly known as CD on a soap opera rather, which is Generations of the Legacy, and currently playing the role of a stylish fashion editor on House of Zwide, Umamage Orogogo, Letoya Makene Pomodo, and also Gogo, Masechaba Mahlodi Sedibana is also joining us. Thanks for joining us on the show and welcome.
Thank you for having us,
Thokoza. I think, Gogo, let me perhaps start with you. I mean, we are asking on the show, namhlanje, Ndokokubana, is Ubungoma now becoming a trend, or is it still actually valid?
I think Ubungoma, idlozi is very, very valid. It is who we are. It is part of our culture. It is part of our ancient traditions. Siphuma khona. It is something that we cannot run away from. There are a lot of discrepancies these days about how people are doing it, about people's choices, about some people who are twasaying, that are not supposed to be twasaying. There was a lot that was happening on these clips, and bengivuma ngabanya ngabantu,
opinions, yes.
because there are people who get told ukuthi kumele uyotwasa, and lo muntu uyagula nje kodwa akaguliswa idlozi. There are unfortunately kobelas out there who will say to you ukuthi kumele utwase ngoba lo muntu udinga imali. There are unfortunately people who are misled, but the biggest thing for me is we come from a time and age where apartheid had put a constitution into place. And this constitution, bengavumi ukuthi we are allowed to practice our African traditions.
Okay.
That is why because now abantu bebasonta and they were practicing their cultures and their traditions, kodwa bebafihla. And now we are just in a day and age where people are woke. We are living in the age of Aquarium.
Yes, yes.
And children are woke. And children have questions. Bafuna ukuyazi ukuthi ngubani, ngibuyaphi, ngiqhamuka kuphi, kwenzakalani. Why is it that abanye abantu bayazi ukuthi babuyaphi thina asazi ukuthi sibuyaphi? And so a lot of people are beginning to embrace their African cultural traditions.
I think, Mr. Chaba, just to pick up on what Ukoko Letoya has just said, maybe let's expand on those discrepancies now. How does one distinguish between an actually valid trend, Ubungoma, when it's actually valid, and also ezike that are bogus?
Yazi Ubungoma, I think it goes back to imento yakho, where you start ukobela wakho, because before you can declare umuntu itwasana, ukuthi kumele atwase, you need to go through a thorough consultation. Because I think that is where it imosheka khona. That's where it goes wrong, when a consultation goes wrong. Because these bugas healers, I don't think they go deep. Ukuthi kukhona abantu othola ukuthi bayagula. There's a certain ceremony that they need to do. After that ceremony, then everything will fall into place. But because now we've got manje ama healers abafuna imali in man-making schemes, they do not go to that extent. Mebabona umuntu agula bayamthwasisa. Uphethwe ikhanda uyathwasa. You do that. Kanti these things zinama categories. There are people who are meant to practice so that they can also be abogobela. There are people abathwasayo okuthola ukuthi bathwasela mhlambe umndeni ohlakazekile or things not going right. So mina I say it begins wrong. That's why maybe it will end wrong. So if we can get abogobela abakwazi ukubhekisisa ukuthi what the core problem is and explain to umuntu ukuthi uthwasa because you know, so abanye bajabulela lento ukuthwasa kuphela bangazi ukuthi bathwasela ini. Kumele wazi ukuthi ungena omkhulu so that is why uthwasa, and you need to know those people anyeke uvume yonke into, because obviously abantu aba curious, they'll just fall into any traps. But then abogobela abafuna ukufunisisa ukuthi what the real problem is ngalo muntu ozile for a consultations. That is why hence it becomes a trend. It becomes a trend because you go to if you can go to the right person, then I think the trend, I can say trend maybe is 30%.
All right.
But 70%, I'm telling you, it is real. It is happening.
And Koko Letoya, just to also add on that, Ukok Master Shaba is talking about the fact that there are instances when it's actually valid. But you find that now, umdosele etwasile, they quit Ubungoma. Is that something that's allowed?
But you know, at the end of the day, no one has a gun to their head. We've been given freedom of choice. God gave us freedom of choice. So if you're going to decide ukuthi uzolahla ubunyanga bakho, choice yakho. It's not something you should do ngoba uthwase kabuhlungu. Uyihambile lendlela like kabuhlungu. You shouldn't do it. But
and consequences?
There are many consequences. There's always consequences. And some people don't even see that ama consequence maybe azihlali nawe, but they fall on the next generation.
Okay, all right.
The sins of the father falling onto the children. But at the end of the day, we all have freedom of choice. You have a choice, ukungena ephehlweni or ukudecide ukuthi mina angizingeni lezi. You've got a choice, ukubaleka ephehlweni.
All right.
Or you've got a choice, ukulahla ubunyanga bakho. But what the consequences are, because there's consequences to
And they
each
will
choice
follow
that
you.
we have got to also
All right.
deal with each consequence.
Okay, unfortunately, we're going to have to park this conversation for now because we quickly have to go to an ad breaker. But that's it, right on Expressions, as we continue to have this very important conversation. So do stay with us. We'll be right back after this.
Welcome back. You are still tuned here on Expressions, Apagunga Pambili SABC 1. We still continue with the discussion, and I'm Shanje. Joining us now is a TV personality and entrepreneur, Uthabiso Mokheti, who has resigned from Ubungoma. Well, the question is, does one ever resign from a spiritual calling? Well, Utingoku, he is a child of God. Uqhuba ilizwi lakhe uJesu. Samuel, you're...
I am Sam.
You are Sam.
I am.
Mokheti, welcome to Expressions. How are you doing?
I'm blessed. I'm highly favored. Wena mama?
Ngiyaphila nami Nkosi. Siyaphaula into yokubana in your journey you accepted a calling Ubungoma, and years later you resigned. And the question is, does one resign from a spiritual calling? Because bathi yingulo. What happened? Why did you resign?
Well, utebati. Isimna andimamela bantu. I listen to what my God and Savior says. So if he tells me to stop something or start something, I will do exactly that. And that's what I did.
And what led you to accepting Ngoma? Because siyazi abanye mhlambi bazothi, no, I had a dream. What led you to accept a calling? Because you've been practicing for 2 years.
Yeah, well, what happened with me is the first reason why I even left Ubungoma is because I left uNkulunkulu in the first place. Okay. I went through a series of unfortunate events, like most people. The death of my parents, both of them, the death of my brothers. I lost umsebenzi, I lost my marriage. And in that, I lost my dignity and my relationship with God. And when you live in an open space like I do because of being a public figure, you get a lot of people that feel entitled to come and advise you. So certain people would come and say, Yazi Ntabiso, this is happening because of flateli laws. And now, if wena ungasondeli edlozini lakho and answer your calling, uzogcina uhlanya or abantwana bakho, basically there was a lot of fear being induced. And as a person who's seen more than 7 coffins leave my house, I had the fear, which was rightfully so, Yoruba, I could be next. And because I had moved away from my first original call, which is to read the Bible, worship with God, and follow Jesus Christ, it was easy for all these other voices to have a hold over me. You see, once you've got fear, and once you are desperate, ungenza noba yintoni na ukustopa usizi. And I felt, well, they could be right. And because I was no longer speaking to God, I was now listening to other people, and those people were advising me, and I had tried everything, and I felt, I'm far away from God.
Only option.
Yes, Kanti, I'm the one who had moved from him. See, God promises us that he will never leave us nor forsake us. But I forgot that because I was so hurt, and these material things that were taken from me, to me, had more value than uThixo wami. I was focusing on those losses more than him.
You speak about embracing ilizwi lika God who spoke to you.
Yes.
I mean, so would you say that mhlawumbe the practice of Ubungoma or seeing young people that are embracing this calling, it's ungodly? Ayonto enxulumene nomntana.
All I can say is, because I'm a Christian, the first foundation and denial, I listen to what God says. And in Exodus 20, the Lord teaches us that we shouldn't equal him to anyone. Ungusomandla, unguyemyemu, emiyedwa, akadinge ukuncediswa. And uthi uYehova kuthi, we shouldn't bow down to any graven images or worship anything ehamba emhlabeni. We are here to dominate. And the only person that I should bow to is God. But xa sendisebungomeni, I had forgotten that teaching. I was now bowing to kwabanye bangoma. I was now bowing to my dead ancestors. And I love them. I love my mom, I love my father in absentia. But God didn't create them, I should worship them. He created them, and he should lead me. I had forgotten the teachings of God, and I went against what my God teaches me. So all I'm saying is...
And you followed.
And I followed what I felt was right at that time. So if you are called of God, if you are listening to Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit, you will walk according to that path. Okay. My first mistake was moving from my original call as God's son and that one who should follow Jesus Christ.
Speaking of moving to your original call, we we are going to be taking some of your comments on social media. Sizawuqala ngaye uMalusi Sincanca uthi into yobana sekwaphenduka ifashion ukuthwasa kuba akawazi namayeza lamathwasa seke khona nje uninzi lawo. Okay, let's take a look at another comment. Unosipho Mdaka yena uthi imbangi yesono yimali msasi intwaso bayibona ilishishini labo elikhawulezileyo odadethu nabakhuluwa diyema apho. Okay, now let's take the last comment. Umamaya Nonqala uyathi into yokubana intente zopasta ezizigcwalise ilizwe lonke kungoba yifortune zona nabo bonke bayaphilisa xa betsho into isemntwini nogobela banezizathu sabo sokuthwasisa intsha rather. Okay, so those are some of the comments coming through from social media. Make sure now you exercise those little twiddle fingers. We'll be reading some of your comments throughout. We have abantu bayaphawula ku social media, and I mean the last comment is saying that we see a lot of churches, Christian churches rather, embracing callings as Christianity. But now why do they denounce when it comes to African callings like Ubungoma?
Like I said to you, because Uyehova puts it specifically. You see, God doesn't force anyone. You can either be a Christian, you can be an atheist, you can even be a Satanist. If inkolo yakho leyo. But if you believe in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, ungamxubi. That's all.
And I mean, on the table, what are some of the consequences that come with resigning from Ubungoma? Even which generation they can suffer from this decision. Do you have any fears?
It's the fear in the first place that led me entwasweni. You see, I went through many things that other people won't go through and that some others have. And because I focused on fear, I ended up but now that I'm back in the Lord, I can say this to you in answer. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power, love, and a sound mind. And that's how I'm walking now. So before they were mine, they are God's. He says before he formed them in their mother's womb, so he will protect his, because Nami as their father, I am under his umbrella. So I have no fear because I've got faith in God.
So at the time when you were practicing Ubungoma, because I understand that there's a lot of ancestral True. So beliliphi ilizwi lika Yesu at that time?
I had silenced it. And as the Lord kept on speaking to me about stopping the practice, I would be on some, but you didn't come through when I needed you. You see, the first thing is bitterness. When you are bitter towards God, when you are angry towards God, when you don't have a relationship with him, then you give a chance for other voices to speak to you. I was listening to those voices. It's up until Ndikupuge moving from Ubungoma and now becoming Ukobela that God said, if you carry on with this, then you are now challenging me face to face. And that was my moment of waking up, because kuyo yonke into sisi akakho umuntu endimyikayo ndiyikuyehova who has the power to give life and take life. So I couldn't ignore his voice when it spoke to me. The fame that I have, the family that I have, all those things that I received that are material and emotional, but I forgot that when I was in pain. So when he reminds me, I would not ignore that.
It's deep. I wish we had more time to dissect this, because it's quite an interesting conversation. And patience zakho ezibuzhilisha when you were a sangoma ziyazibuz ba hayibo nkosi yami umkhulu manje sekwenze njani ngisafuna phela umuthi nani. But thank you so much for joining us. Well, now Mbukeli Abekaya, make sure that you form part of this discussion. Share with us on our social media what is your thoughts on this conversation. We continue, but let's take a quick break. You are watching Expressions.
Welcome back to Expressions. Thanks very much for staying with us right here on SABC 1. And now as we continue to talk about Ubungoma and whether is it a fashion statement or actually young people are finally getting, their spiritual awakening. I have the honor and pleasure right now of being joined by a student who also happened to have gone through the process of Ubungoma, who is Atekosi, and he joins us. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Togoza. I think, firstly, do you think it is finally young people getting their spiritual awakening, that we are seeing a sort of a trend of young people also about Twasa, especially even celebrities?
I think on my take on that, I think in Twasa, it's not something that you just wake up, Twasa. I think abazali betu, abanye babalekile into asone. I speak from experience, because Twasa isuka from generation to generation, right? So abanye abazali betu bayibalekile. Now uyafumaniseka uba bona thina ngoku siyafuna ukwazi uba singobani yena sifuna uzazi, because uyafumaniseka uba there's certain things that you don't have answers for. So siyefumaniseke ngoku xa consult with abazali bathi no mntanam, the issue it's that. But then you don't just wake up bese ufuna basangoma, yabo. But okay, in that being said, funeke nathi sibe na connotation nabogogo bethu to understand ukuthi kwenzeka ntoni na. But I don't think it's a trend, but I think we're a generation that needs answers, and the time there's so many issues that we're facing, and then you have affected with issues because
I mean, also speaking about the issues, because Mnyumto may beg to differ and say, because mostly abantu abathwasayo and even young people, they go through that process because they are facing impediments in their lives. So do you then think that that's the main reason why people are going to, get Ubungoma and go Thwasa? Is it because or it's actually for something beyond their control?
Okay. I think Ukuthwasa asithwasi ngokufanayo. Singathwasi ngokufanayo nje singamagqirha different and sibizwa ngehlobo different. So I don't think at some point, I think abanye abantu they have mental issues. Mental issues is a serious issue. But I think when it comes to Thwasa, you don't just really wake up ube sofuna Thwasa. But mna ndinga-advise ba umuntu makaphande indlela afuna uqonda ngayo, because ekugqibeleni into isemntwini. I do know as a generation but we are facing a lot of issues, and I do advocate for mental health issues as well. But I think it doesn't work like that.
I like the fact that you talk about, or you bring the aspect now of a mental illness, because recently a study that was released by a scholar from University of Pretoria that I was just reading mentioned something very pertinent, and it speaks about the fact that the signs and symptoms of Ubungoma are similar to those of a person that is actually going through mental illness. So how do we decipher and distinguish between the two?
As I've said, Thwasa ngehlobo different, yabona, because uyakwazi ukuya kogqirha bathi ugqirha asiyazi uba ugula yintoni na. You go everywhere, yonke indawo, you go to churches, ufumaniseke uba uyazi, but then ufumaniseke uba unogobela orayithi okubambe ehlanza wena. I know even now I've went through some issues personally, but I thought it was a mental thing, and ndandiyibaleka kwamna intwaso because ndandisoyika nam because of the society and the societal norms that we're facing. Ukuthi xa uthwasa, I was very much of a Christian person, and I still am, but I think I had a fear. But in that being said, I had to really get the deeper answers, and I think the reason why my life is better than before is because I got the answer that I wanted. And as I've said, but as
fine. All right, most certainly. Thanks very much, Atenkosi, for joining us on the show. Well, there you have it, Mbogedi, as we continue to talk about Ubungoma and whether is it really a fashion statement or young people are actually getting out of their closets, dare I say. But for now, let's quickly go to an ad break. Stay with us. Welcome back to Expressions. Thanks very much for staying with us. Now, as we continue to have this really important and pertinent conversation about Ubungoma and whether is it a fashion statement or it still holds some truth to it. Gogo Masechaba is still joining me. Now, Gogo, on the other side, we were looking at a different perspective of the conversation, which is about the contrast between traditional healers and also Christians. Perhaps, can you denounce Christianity?
I think that's where the confusion is. You cannot separate umoya kaNkulunkulu nobungoma. So the biggest mistake ends most sangomas is differentiating bahlukanisa uNkulunkulu nobungoma. And the Sotho Bible that I'm reading, it means God is the creator of everything. They follow a protocol kaNkulunkulu, which makes them abantwana bakaNkulunkulu nabo. And there's also a confusion ukuthi must practice ubungoma. Si worship ama ancestors. We do not worship, we acknowledge. Si acknowledge la sibuya khona, because I can't go anywhere ngazi ukuthi ngibuyaphi. So it's just like respecting umama wakho nobaba wakho basaphila. That's what it is. And then inyanga, you cannot to practice ubungoma but uNkulunkulu akekho.
Okay. Because, so they can coexist.
Yes, they can coexist because umoya lobona izindaba or connecta nedluzi is from God himself.
Okay.
You understand? So what we call is thunya. So you need to awaken lo moya kaNkulunkulu phakathi kwakho, equally embracing bagini ba communicate nawe. You understand? So you cannot separate the two. That is why uthola ubuthakathi bu exist because they have silenced God's voice. Ngasho kanjalo. Kanti you cannot. Akumelanga usihlukanise because i-satellite, we call it satellite emoyeni. Lento amathambo do not speak at the end of the day. Mawulahla amathambo akunama voices from amathambo. Kukhona umoya okhuluma phakathi kwakho. I always say amathambo is just like a K53. You just look into a theory, but you also need to listen to loyo moya. Sometimes, with my experience, you pray first. You are busy. No, Ezekiel did the same thing in the Bible.
Yeah.
Then let me moya connector. You go with the flow.
All right, Gogo. I think the gist of what you just said is that they actually can coexist together when we talk about God and also Ubungoma. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have. I think we really do need more time when it comes to having these really important conversations. Well, that was Ukoko Masechaba joining us. And thanks very much, Nakwembugedu Expressions, for being a part and parcel of the show. Hopefully, as much as Ukoko Litoya did say that people have freedom of expression, but certainly do heed the calling that you have. Be it any calling, but okubalekile nokumqoka kuwukuthi ulandele your calling call.
Awusuyakhuluma Thokoza. Thokoza. That's how we wrap up the show. Thank you so much for Ruban Benani. Asinchino kaloku Litoya uthi thonga lam.
Mina ngizinzang ngenziwa balele ngahawungelewe